Good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us for the Understanding Neighborhood Preservation Tools meeting hosted by the Community and Regional Planning Division of the Planning and Development Department. We're going to give about 5 minutes to let everybody join online, but I did want to start by saying that this meeting will be recorded, so just letting everyone know that recording has begun on our meeting this evening. And if you could use your chat feature, if you could drop your name and what neighborhood you represent in the chat, that would be a great way to help us get warmed up while we're waiting for everyone else to log on. We see some guests are here from Sunnyside and Woodland Heights. We have some representatives from Lakewood, from the Fonde Civic Club, in Sugar Valley. Winlow Place Civic Club, Verde Forest Section 2, Acres Home, Montgomery Terrace. Great, we got all over, which is wonderful. If you've just joined us, we are just waiting a few minutes to give everyone a chance to log on. And in the chat, we are putting, if you'd like to introduce yourself with your name or just the neighborhood you're from to kind of let everybody know where you're joining us from until we get kicked off. We'll start everything at around 6:35. And just so everyone knows, this meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Sims. I'm calling on the phone, therefore I can't use the chat. I'm from Montgomery Terrace subdivision.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Sims.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Betty McCrae from Ella Park Terrace Civic Club.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. McCrae. See, we have some guests from Claremont Place. Eastwood Civic Association, Acres Homes. Don't feel shy. Please go ahead and put in the chat what neighborhood you're representing tonight. And thank you all again for joining us. Acres Homes here. No civic club. That's totally okay. You don't have to represent a civic club. This is a resident-led effort. So we're happy for you all to join us from all of the neighborhoods that you represent here in Houston. I'm going to give it about 1 more minute. Just let everyone get an opportunity to join this virtual world we're in now. Alrighty. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Lindsay Williams. I am a planner with the Community and Regional Planning Division of the Planning and Development Department. I currently am the lead planner for Sunnyside as well as Acres Homes, and I also help with the Cashmere Garden community. But as you all know, this meeting is for all of our Houston communities, and we're happy that you've chosen to join us tonight. We are recording this meeting, so I just want to let everyone know that this recording will be made available on our YouTube channel as well as our other social media outlets once this concludes. So if you missed something or want to go back for a refresher, it would always be there. And I'm going to start off with a few house rules for us tonight. This is Microsoft Teams. We would like to utilize the chat feature tonight. So if there are questions as we go along, please enter those in the chat. We do have a moderator. One of our planners will be moderating those questions throughout the night. At the end of our presentation, we'll also have a period where we'll open it up for question and answer if you want to verbally ask your question or if you're unable to use the chat feature during the presentation. If you're on the phone or virtual, please stay on mute again until we get to the question and answer period. Utilize the chat feature if you need to ask a question or send us any messaging. Once we do open it up for question and answer, to unmute if you're on the phone, *6 is the command that you will use. Next slide. So, as I stated before, we are here as planners of the complete communities, but this presentation is open to all of our communities. I am going to pass it over to our division manager, Lynn Henson, to tell you a little bit about how we got here and what we hope to gain from tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, wow, this is a pretty good crowd tonight. So I want to start by saying today's workshop is on understanding the neighborhood character protection tools that the planning department has. There are a few others in some of the other departments, but we'll focus on tonight what the planning department has and can offer. There are several tools within the planning department that speak to character. That includes minimum lot size, minimum building line, historic districts, and prohibited yard. Tonight, we're going to focus on two of these, mainly the ordinances that address lot size and that address building line. Why these two ordinances? Well, we often hear from neighborhoods that want to protect the neighborhood character of their community. As a city grows in population, these ordinances offer a way for areas on a block-by-block basis or in a larger community to communicate their desires for their community. Within the Complete Communities program, there are 10 complete communities across Houston. These communities are traditionally thought of as underserved and oftentimes vulnerable in many aspects. And each of these 10 communities has developed an action plan. Within these plans, can you go back one slide for just a second? Within these plans, communities have voiced that they wanted to preserve the character of their community. They've done so either in the neighborhood character protection section or in the housing section of their action plans. I want to give you a few examples that show up in these plans. Quote, explore the tools available to protect neighborhood character, including minimum lot size, setback, and other ordinances. Identify and use strategies to preserve historic character. Preserve history, and there are many others in these plans. These tools can especially help neighborhoods that do not have deed restrictions, or maybe they have deed restrictions, but their deed restrictions don't address lot size or they don't address building line. There are blocks and areas all over the city of Houston that have already applied for and received minimum lot size and or minimum building line protections. Not only are they in complete communities, but they're in other areas as well. Next slide. I've mentioned the term ordinances a few times. And what does that mean? Well, minimum building line and minimum lot size are covered under Chapter 42 of the city's Code of Ordinances. Chapter 42 regulates subdivisions and platting, and you can think about that as how the lots are laid out in the community. It also includes lot sizes and building lines that we'll talk about this afternoon, as well as other development related items like streets and driveways and even multi-family residential housing. You can think about ordinances as the rules or the laws that are set by the city of Houston. Staff will lead you through an engaging explanation of how these two tools are and how to apply and answer questions that you might have. I have to say, I'm honored to work with the staff because this team is very knowledgeable about building line and lot size, and they're always available to help homeowners through the process. There are a number of steps, but the staff is always there and willing to assist. You've already met Lindsay Williams. Abraham Zaria is on the call as well. He oversees the program. Devontae Caldwell, who's vital to minimum building line and lot size, as well as oversees prohibited yard parking. And Benny Chambers staffs and processes many of the applications around the city, as well as Cam Yurdy. Cam works with economic development and opportunity zones in the department. Next slide. I do want to point out a few important items. If you have deed restrictions, those deed restrictions may take precedence over city ordinances. And in situations where deed restrictions and ordinances both exist, the most restrictive prevails. It's important to note that these protection tools are community driven. That means that you, the community, need to come to the city of Houston and request these ordinances. You'll need to fill out an application and follow the process. And for those applications that meet the requirements, they are forwarded to City Council for approval and formal adoption. So I'll pause here because I'd like to bring up Benny Chambers to kick off the discussion this evening. He'll begin by explaining some of the definitions that staff use and that you'll hear tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Benny Chambers. I'm the lead planner for 8 Leaf Westwood and Third World Complete Communities. So let's jump right on into some definitions that you might hear a lot while you're doing the process for the lot size and building line. So for example, you hear the word lot. Basically, that's an undivided piece of land. If you just think about your home on this plot of land, so that's your lot. Building line. That is the space between the front of the building to the property line. So when we come out, that's the area that we're measuring. Single family residential, some examples here are a single family home, a home with a garage apartment, well, a garage apartment with that's no more than 900 square feet, or a duplex. Subdivision, Basically, that's a division of land to lay out street and the lots. Block face, when you think of block face, if you stay on a corner lot, I tell people if you just stand out there, then you walk to the end of the street, the next corner house, that's your block. That's your block face. Um, the next slide here, with types of ordinance applications. These to preserve a lot size, to preserve a lot size and building line character um, of a single family residential neighborhood. You use these three applications here: special minimum lot size block, special minimum lot size area, or a special minimum building line block. And I'm sorry for the vacuum noise. What these ordinances will do, they will preserve a lot size character. They will preserve a single family use on lots. They will determine how close buildings can be built to the front of the property lines. And also there are things that cannot happen, cannot prevent new or larger homes from being built, will not dictate particular style of housing or building, and will not prevent existing commercial or multifamily or industrial uses from operating or rebuilding. And next I have Abraham Zariga, who will continue with the presentation.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Oh, let me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Oh, great. Thank you. All right. So I'll start talking about the minimal lot size block application. Ben, if you could go to the next slide, please. And so just to start with this ordinance, I would like to clarify a couple of things. What the special minimum lot size block does is create two restrictions. One is the lot size, the minimum lot size. Basically, this ordinance allows for the preservation of the lot size character on one block or two block faces. And the other thing that it does is creates the land use restriction to single family lots, to those lots that are vacant or single family when the application is submitted. Okay, and I apologize, I still see the special minimum lot size block slide. I don't know if my internet is running a little slow. There you go, thank you. So this is basically an example that I want to show you guys. This is on First Ward, Summer Street. This is a corner lot where, as you can see, is vacant. And this area did not have at the time, and I still believe that they don't have any deed restrictions or special minimum lot size restrictions. So when that happens, when you don't have protection in your neighborhood, basically anybody can acquire the property and subdivide it, as you can see in the next picture. So as you can see, this is Summer Street at the corner of with Silver, and where it was a vacant lot. Now you see 2 or 3 townhouses. So without any protection, the city allows a lot to be subdivided as small as 1,400 square feet if it meets certain criteria. But without protection, this is what it may come in your neighborhood, or they already establish those type of townhouses. Next slide, please. So some additional information about the ordinance itself. So an ordinance is approved by City Council, it lasts for 40 years. Okay, and again, one application is approved, it will create single family restrictions to those lots that were vacant or single family when the application is submitted. So for those properties that are commercial or multifamily, they will have the minimal outside restriction. However, they will not have the land use restriction to single family. In other words, I have a multifamily property within a minimal lot size ordinance. And the established minimal lot size, let's say 5,000 square feet. I cannot subdivide the lot in a way that is less than 5,000 square feet. However, I can demolish my the building on the property and build another multifamily, or maybe build a commercial building. So again, the land use restriction will apply to those lots that are vacant and single family when the application is submitted. If I change that land use from multifamily or commercial to single family, then the single family land use restriction will apply to my property. Okay, and then, excuse me, any time of violation that you see in the community, an area that is within the minimal lot size block ordinance, then one day to enforce or to contact the city is by dialing 311, calling 311 and report that violation. Now, this ordinance does not ask you to change the size of the lot or what exists on the property. If you have a property that is bigger or smaller than the established minimum lot size, that is okay. These restrictions are only for future development. And let's say that the community decide that they don't want to have these restrictions anymore, then you can submit a recent application to basically to no longer have those restrictions, but you have to wait 5 years and those years start counting from the moment that the application was approved. Thank you. Next slide. Again, I think my internet is running a little slow, but the next slide is about special minimum building line block applications. Okay, so with the different, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Before we move on, we do have a question about enforcement. I know you touched on that just a second ago, but Kyle is asking about city building code stopping before a non-conforming building is built. Could you just speak briefly to the role that the city plays in reviewing things as they come up in a minimum lot size district?
Yes, so once we receive an application, we place holds on the properties, meaning that they will be protected while the application is in process. So the restrictions, again, is only for the land use and the lot size, right? So no subdivision may happen while the application is in process. Any other type of permit that is required, or if somebody wants to purchase, if it's not against, it will not against the application process of the minimal lot size ordinance, then our division will have the power to release the hold for the specific project or permit. Let's say that you want to work on plumbing, a solar panel, any window replacement and things like that. Any permit that you acquire that's not going to go against the ordinance of the application process, then we will be able to remove it for that specific permit.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so building lines. So the difference with the minimum lot size application is that the special minimum building line block, excuse me, application does not have land use restriction. It only allows the preservation of the building line character on one side of the block face. I'm sorry, on one block face or two block faces facing each other. Okay, so basically a building line, as Benny stated, is the setback, is the distance between the property line and where the building is or should be. And this, you can see there is a plat or a survey, I believe, of the of a block as an example. And if you can go to the next slide, we have another picture. Yes, and I believe my internet is running a little slow too. But so this is just a picture where you can see what a building line ordinance, the houses, how the houses will look in a building line ordinance. Okay, normally the city has a building line established of 10 feet, but without a minimum lot size, without a minimum building line ordinance, it's easy for property owners to get the variance. So without any deed restrictions or special minimum building line restrictions, then you will have houses being built closer to the property line. So again, other additional information, the building lines on minimal lot size block applications are quite similar on the application process. So in this case as well, this ordinance will last for 40 years. Again, the ordinance will not include any single family land use restriction. Excuse me, the ordinance will also be any violation to the ordinance, you need to contact the 311. And one thing that is important is if more people call complaining about the same issue, might help for some action to be taken a little faster. But again, you can contact us as well. Let's say existing lots with a building line less than the established special minimum building line will remain and are grandfathered in the ordinance. Same thing, if you have a building line that is longer or smaller than the established minimum lot size, established the special minimum building line, then that is fine. We're not asking for you to make any changes on your property, on the building or setback. This is only for future development. Let's see. Now, the future additions to the building, including inhabitable porches, are subject to the special minimum building line. And we have a slide to talk about that. And an ordinance can be applied for removal no earlier than 5 years after the effective date. So again, if the community decide that they don't want to have these restrictions, you need to wait 5 years for the moment that the application has been approved by City Council to apply for another application that we have, which is to rescind the special minimum building line restrictions. Next slide. So the next slide are pictures that shows how some porches exist in the community. So we have the inhabitable, I'm sorry, I'm having such a hard time saying that word, and uninhabitable porches. So an inhabitable porches is an area of a porch where you can actually fit or put a furniture that is big enough to eventually be included in the house. So when we do the setback or the building line calculation, we include that. We measure from the property line where the porch is. But on the other side, the other example, that an inhabitable porch is a small porch. It's something that you cannot fit a furniture, as you can see in the picture on your right side. But on the left side, the porch is big enough to put furniture or maybe be incorporated to the house. So on the right, we measure the distance between the property line or where the wall is, or maybe the entrance of the house. But on the left side, we do the measurement from the property line to where the porch starts. And that's something that a lot of people ask questions about that. So we want to just be clear, and anytime there's a building line application, now you know that how we do our measurements based on the porch and the property. Next slide. All right, so another things that we need to have under consideration when we review a special minimum lot size block application and the building line block application. So the boundary of the application may consist of one block face or two block faces facing each other. Okay, the boundary needs to consist of at least 60% single family lots. So let's say that you have an application that consists of 10 lots. So 6 of them needs to be single family. Okay. Now the application needs to come with a petition of support. That needs to represent 51% of the area. So the bigger the lot, the bigger the support. Okay. The response form is another voting process that comes with the area application that my colleague Devante will talk more about it. And so there's areas that have the restrictions. Some of them do not establish a minimum lot size or a building line, so there's no problem for us to accept the application. However, some of the restrictions do have minimum lot size and building lines established. So let's say that you're in a situation that your block or neighborhood have the restrictions that establish minimum lot size. The only way for us to accept that application is that if within the boundary of the application, one lot is opt out from the restrictions. Same thing with the building line. They apply for a minimum lot size block application and minimum building line block application. Again, if you have an area or boundary of 2 block faces and all of them are part of the restrictions, but one opt out from the restrictions when the restrictions were created. So that's enough reason for us to accept the application.
Abraham, we've got another question in the chat here about building lines specifically. Can a 1,000, Iva asks if a 1,000 square foot home can be built behind an already existing home with the lot and building line protection enacted on it.
The building line, it shows the setback between the property line and which is the front property line to the building of the house. We don't, that's the only restriction it has. Anything else that any construction or additional unit that wants to build behind that or passing the building line, this restriction will not stop that.
And Abraham, can I add, your question specifically asked about a 1,000 square foot home. Currently, our code of ordinances, there is a maximum of 900 square feet if the secondary unit is detached. You can think about a garage apartment or a granny flat. If you want to have more than one unit on a house for single family, you can have a duplex, and that is still considered single family. Currently, Livable Places, which is a committee that is looking at our code of ordinances, is considering making a recommendation to City Council and the Planning Commission that would change this definition or make a new category of definitions. So if you're interested in following that, I urge you to join Livable Places meetings monthly. Yes, maximum of 900 square feet. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit about the percentage of support. Again, the percentage of support is based on the area. So the bigger the lot, the bigger the support. So the ordinance within Chapter 42 says that the application needs to have at least 51% support. So if we receive an application and it happens to have the 51% support, and it does not have a protest, and I'll talk a little bit more about that pretty soon. So it goes straight to City Council for approval. It goes to the board director to sign the documents needed, and then go to legal work on the ordinance, and then it go to City Council. They say that it's the application has 51% support, and we receive a protest. Then the application will go to Planning Commission for a public hearing. We will notify the property owners, and everybody will have the opportunity to speak at the public hearing, either in favor or in opposition of the application. And if the application comes with a petition of support that has less than 51% support, then it will go straight to Planning Commission. We still notify the property owners, and we'll give the same number of dates in case somebody else wants to protest. And again, we will notify the property owners about the date, time, and location of the public hearing. And you will have the opportunity to speak in favor or in opposition of the application. Next slide. And please, if you mute your, thank you. Okay, so the building line, the application for the lot size and building line is similar. Once we receive the application and we make sure that it meets all the criteria within Chapter 42, we notify the property owners about the existence of the application. And with that, we let them know that they have 30 days to protest. Okay. We also notify the applicant about the acceptance of the application. And the only thing that the applicant needs to do is to place signs on the street. Most likely will be 2 signs for special minimum lot size, block boundary, and building line as well. But within the 30 days, then there is no protest and it has 51% support, then the planning, the director of the planning department will approve the application, and then we'll go to city council for approval. If the application does not meet the 51% support, or if has a protest, then it will go to planning commission for a public hearing. Then the planning commission will either approve the application, deny it, or it will defer it for 2 weeks if needed for more information, to obtain more information, or to do more research about the area. So if planning commission decides to move forward with the application, then it will go to city council for approval. If they decide to deny it, then you will not be allowed or will not be able to accept any application for the same boundary for a year. But after a year, if you want to give it a try, then you're more than welcome to do so. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about special minimum lot size area. And for that, I will invite Devante Caldwell.
Thank
to
you,
continue with the
Abraham.
talk. Go ahead.
Thank you, Abraham. Good evening, everyone. So with the special minimum lot size area application, although this has similarities with the block application for special minimum lot size, there are key differences. Next slide, please. This application allows an owner or a representative of a civic club or homeowners association, if one wishes to apply for multiple blocks or block faces, then the lot size area application will give that person the ability to do so. But to go over some of the eligibility, to be eligible, this application boundary must include no less than 5 block faces or blocks that are composed or includes 5 lots or more alongside these block faces. Single family, there must be, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this seems like a good time to address one of the questions in the chat about
Yes.
the maximum number. Thank you. Related to what you're talking about now. Thank you. I'm sorry, the question was, is there a maximum size for the minimum lot size area?
Yes, well, there's not a maximum, but there is a minimum size for the area application. The area application must include no less than 5 block faces. Anything beyond 5 block faces is acceptable within the area application. And within those block faces, the number of lots alongside of a side of a street must have at least 5 lots on those block faces. Within the area application boundary, there also must be at least 80% of the lots currently for single family use. And unlike the lot size block, which the requirement is at least 60%, but with the area, the percentage is the minimum percentage of single families in the area is 80%. Also, there are 2 stages of showcasing the support from the owners in the area. When an area application is submitted to the Planning and Development Department, the applicant must collect signatures from owners of at least 10% of the number of lots in that area. So this will be the initial petition of support. But then later in the process, which I will talk more about in the later slides, is to have at least 55% support from the owners in the area. And then also for an area that may already consist of lots protected through deed restrictions, at least 10% of these lots would need to be, wouldn't, at least 10% of these lots would need to be not be covered by the deed restrictions. So that would be acceptable if there are lots that are, at least 10% of these lots are not already protected through these deed restrictions addressing lot size. Next slide, please. So this is a map example of one of our previous applications submitted for a neighborhood, and this is an area application that includes more than at least 5 block faces, like the north side of that Lindale Street, the north and south side of Lindale Streets, with the addition of the block along King Street and Melbourne Street. So what you see are multiple, more than one block within this boundary, as well as the at least the minimum percentage of 80% of single families within this map. Next slide, please. Okay, so with the process, there is an additional step, and generally this application process for a lot size area is a little bit extended in comparison to a block application. After our application has been submitted and we have done our initial review of this application, a community meeting is required to hold during this process. And at this community meeting, the purpose is to inform property owners of a current active area application. It'll be kind of similar to what we're providing for tonight, but a little bit more in depth of the process and what they would need to do after the community meeting, which is to submit a response form indicating whether they would select either yes if they are in support of the proposed special minimum lot size, or they will select no on that form if they are in opposition to the proposed special minimum lot size. And with that response form, after filling it out, they would need to submit to the Planning and Development Department to collect to determine, in order for staff to determine the percentage of the area that is in support. And another important fact about this area is that there must be at least 55% of an application boundary in support in order for this application to move forward, which these applications will automatically be forwarded to Planning Commission for a public hearing. This is a requirement for all area applications if they manage to receive at least 55% of support from the owners in the area. Once it goes to Planning Commission, the commission can decide whether to approve, deny, or modify the boundary depending on the evidence of support within the area. And this application gets approved through Planning Commission, then the Planning Commission will then this application will be forwarded from the Planning Commission to City Council. Throughout this process, we are notifying the applicant and the property owners every step of the way in regards to the community meeting, which we will coordinate closely with the applicant on selecting the proper location for this community meeting to be held, to inform the property owners that will be subject to this proposed ordinance, as well as as well as the response forms that would be mailed to all property owners, and then the public hearing that will be scheduled.
And Devante, if I may, I would like
Yes.
to add a couple of things with the lot size area applications. The a boundary of the minimum lot size area application may have up to 500 lots if the boundary consists of two subdivisions. But if the boundary consists of only one subdivision, the application may have up to 400 lots. Okay, and also with the 55% support within the response forms, if it doesn't meet if it's a very hard process. It's important for the community to be involved, and the planning department will help all the way in the application process. But let's say that if it doesn't meet the 55% support, we can talk to the applicant and see if we can modify the boundary in a way that it meets the 55% support and the other criteria in Chapter 42. And one more thing, within minimal lot size block application and building line block application, if there is a protest or lack of support and it goes to planning commission also can modify the boundary by removing one block face if they think that one block face does not have enough support, but the other one does. And I just want to also add that in the presentation.
Thank you, Abraham.
But Devontae, before we move on, there are two questions in the chat I'd like for us to briefly address. One is from RC asking about a deed restricted property that has a 2,500 square foot minimum lot size, but the calculated area for the ordinance would be 6,250 square feet. Would that still qualify for the minimum lot size ordinance designation? So the minimum lot size, the ordinance minimum size would be larger than the deed restriction minimum size.
I'll be happy to answer that. So if your property is already protected or you already have a minimum lot size protection with the deed restrictions, then the area will not qualify for a minimum lot size block application. But let's say that one property within the boundary that you would like to apply for is opt out from the restrictions, then yes, we can accept it and we go with whatever the lot size character is, but the deed restriction or that restriction within the deed restriction, the minimum lot size within the deed restriction will prevail the minimum lot size ordinance.
Okay, and the other question, there are actually two questions here about process for the notifications. L. Hunsacker has asked, who is notified in advance and by what means? Is that USPS and is it distance from the site or any address within a certain number of addresses that gets notified?
Yes, within the notice, these notices are, we use property information from the Harris County Appraisal District website to obtain the mailing addresses. And specifically, these notices are mailed to to all property owners within the application boundary, whichever is submitted for this proposed ordinance. We will directly send these notices will be directed to those owners that live within the boundary or have a property that they owned within that boundary.
And then the follow-up to that from Kyle is when applying for the ordinances, does the applicant need to come in with the signatures in hand, or does the planning department send those letters asking about support? And I think you just touched on that, but I wanted to make sure we directly address that question.
With the block applications, part of the application requirements is for the applicant to provide the signatures within that submitted packet. So having those obtaining at least is the goal, to obtain at least 51% support from the owners within the block application boundary. For the area, when this upon submission of the application, there needs to be at least 10% support from the owners in signatures from at least 10% of the property owners within the area. And then there will be response forms mailed out for a 30-day period that will, for a 30-day window. So these response forms will be mailed out to all the owners in the area for them to fill out their position, whether they are in support or in opposition with the application.
Okay. And one last question, since we are on the topic of public hearings, Broderick has asked have a little more detail in the public meeting aspect. Who is responsible for planning, community outreach, and actually running the public hearing or meeting? Is that a city employee, or is there a firm that is hired to do that process?
Yeah, with the community meetings, we will our only ask from the applicant is to have a location that could be a host for this meeting. We will bring the presentation, any other materials that we will bring for this meeting at that location. So we are asking for the applicant to provide us those suggestions of locations that can host this meeting, and we will bring the materials.
Okay, I think Broderick.
And also preferably, Abraham, you can expand upon this, but these locations are ideally supposed to be, open to the public, and ideally they have the logistics in place for us to present. But Abraham, you can expand on that.
Yes. So within the application, there is a portion where the applicant may suggest 3 possible locations for the planning department to host the community meeting. And the purpose of this is to educate the property owners about what means to have a special minimum lot size area ordinance in the properties, that restriction they create, so they can have a decision about if they're in support or in opposition when they receive the response forms. In regards to the public hearing for planning commission, staff will do the presentation, and it's on Thursday, every other Thursday of the month. And that's basically everybody's welcome to speak. They will have 2 minutes. You're welcome to bring pictures or any other documents that you would like the planning commission to see. And there's no firm. It's all the interactions between the staff from the planning department and the community.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. I do see that Broderick raised his hand after Devontae provided a preliminary response. Broderick, did you have another question, or was that sufficient answers for you?
Hello?
Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
That was a sufficient enough answer. I just wanted to make sure that just clarity. The context of what I was asking, they did have bits and pieces, and it's based off of my history. In Austin, when the airport wanted to do an additional terminal, they sat down and said, we have to talk to every business owner that is affected by the boundary of the airport expanding with a terminal, which is a huge construction expanse. So they then went out and talked to a private firm and said, we don't have these addresses. We're an airport, even though we're with the city. That's not what we do. We're just trying to build a terminal. So they contracted with a private firm to secure the addresses of all the businesses in the affected area, which was basically the entire boundary around the airport, because they were going to be doing massive construction. So I was only asking, when he was making the references to the we, whether in this scenario, it is specifically city employees that put the meeting together, city employees that look for the addresses, city employees that take in that information as far as planning, and then city employees who put on the meeting. Unlike in Austin, the private firm was hired to find a meeting location, do the community outreach, and they were very effective at it, and then host the meeting, allow city, airport staff, and business owners to all get together, have their meeting, give their concerns, take the input back, give it to the airport and whatever city employees, and it just took that function of logistics out of their hand. So I was just curious in regards to this process, which they did answer when they kept saying we, that should be the planning department, city employees, that no external person is involved in this. It is the city planning department, city employees, people in addresses in the affected area, and they find a location and they get together, meet, and have the discussion. And after that, that's pretty much a wrap. So that was the context of it. So I heard that it's just you guys, and I just want to be clear if that's what you wanted to convey.
Yes, it like the planning and development department. Yes, we are the planners that are working with the applicant, and also we are in communication with the owners throughout the application process, all the owners within the application boundary.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide. I guess, we are approaching the general questions and answer section, but we can answer any more of your questions. We have like a few minutes, but before we conclude, any questions that we were not able to get through in the presentation, or any questions that you have now, please feel free to type in your questions in the chat.
Well, you can also, I'm sorry, Devante, go ahead.
No, I'll just opening up.
You can also raise your hand, and that will help us to keep the any questions you may have. If you want to make a comment or questions, we can keep it in an organized way by raising your hand on the chat.
Not seeing anything come through at this point, gentlemen.
I'd like to, for the record, especially for those that may be watching this information at a later time, you can find information about both building line and lot size online in the planning department portion of the city's website. You can find it at www.houstontx.gov/planning, and look for minimum lot size and minimum building line in the right sidebar. I've placed that link in the chat as well.
Thank you, Lynn. We have had a couple of questions come through here. L. Hunsaker has asked, no distance from the boundary, I could have a significant character change in my backyard, and I could learn about the change when construction equipment shows up. I'm not certain exactly what the question is there, but maybe if y'all can speak to the distance from the boundary aspect.
I just want to add that signs are also posted to notify not only direct neighbors, but those near the area that an application has been filed on that area. So if there is a minimum lot size or block application somewhere near you, they are publicly required to post signs notifying anyone in that area that the applications have been filed as well. So we do that because we are aware that some may not be in the boundary and will not receive a letter, but the signs will be publicly posted for all to see, and you're more than welcome to call the planning department to inquire about the application and when it will be presented to planning commission or whatever process it's going through.
Good clarification. To address Kyle's notes in the chat, I think we've already noted that the presentation will be available after the meeting. And I think Lynn addressed your question about where you can find applications at the website she gave earlier. Kay has asked for us to speak briefly to the renewal process for blocks whose lot size or building line are reaching the expiration.
Yeah, I can answer that. So we're in the these coming years, we're gonna have applications, block applications and building line applications that are going to expire. The minimum lot size and the minimum building lines applications came to the city of Houston back in 1999 for the building lines and 2001 for the lot size. So we've been notified the property owners about the expiration date for those ordinances. The building line, back then, the application was good for 20 years, or the ordinance. And with a minimum lot size, the applications that were approved between 2001 and 2007, they do not have the single family land use restriction. So if you want to, excuse me, renew the special minimum building line ordinances, you can do so. It's an easy process. You don't require the bring the petition of support, as long as you bring the application form with the applicant information, and also the survey is optional. The building lines application nowadays, we request a survey per block face. That will help us determine what the building line is. Oh, I'm sorry, the property line is on the block. But for the renewal, we don't ask that. This is optional, but it will be nice. It will help us in the process. And if the application, the renewal application is approved by City Council, it will be it will last for 20 years. So the renewal will have the same restrictions from the original ordinance. So with a minimum lot size renewal, it's the same thing. We don't ask for petition or support, but the difference is that if this application or this renewal application for the lot size is approved, it will last for 20 years and it will have a minimum lot size restriction. However, it will not have the single family land use restriction. So if you're okay with that, let's say that you have the restriction that does not establish a minimum lot size, but it has the land use restriction, then renewing the minimum lot size ordinance could be a good option if you're okay to have this ordinance for another 20 years. But if you want to include the land use restriction, then you will need to submit a new special minimum lot size block application.
We did just get another question from Maria, noting that her neighborhood does not have deed restrictions, and they are looking to enact some protections, in potentially either deed restrictions or minimum lot size process. And she's asking if either one is faster or more effective, either pursuing deed restrictions or minimum lot size process.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Lynn.
Well, we do process the building minimum lot size applications here in the department. We, as the planning department, don't process deed restrictions. However, lot size applications can go through rather quickly, and I would characterize quickly as several months, provided they do not have any protests. When applications receive protests, they have extra steps and then are forwarded to Planning Commission, and so that takes additional months. So on the lower end, an application could go through, and I'm saying a couple, meaning maybe 3 to 4 months. And on the longer end, we've seen applications that go through the protest period that could take up to a year. That's on the other end of the spectrum. For deed restrictions, it it would take a longer process in that the community has to get together and agree, would need to either work with an organization such as the Houston Volunteer Lawyers Association in order to get pro bono support or to raise funds and hire their own attorney. It could be a longer process going through deed restrictions. But then every application is different and we take each application on a case-by-case basis. Does that help answering your question about timing?
Yeah, while we wait to see if Maria has a follow-up there, thank you for that, Lynn. We did get another question. Okay, and she said yes, that was helpful there. So we did get a question from CGJ about where they can find more information or a link showing expiring minimum lot size protections and information such as the effective and ending dates.
We do not have a link. What we've been doing is notifying the property owners of the expiration date. Within the ordinance, there's it says that the those property owners may apply for a renewal application within those last 2 years of the ordinance. This is something that we have started. So to be honest, having the link is a good suggestion, a good idea to include that. So we might have to work on that. But so far, what we've been doing is basically notify the property owners within the boundary of the existing ordinance about the expiration date of the ordinance, and to contact us if they want to renew the application, or for minimum lot size ordinance, if they want to also have the additional restriction of single family use, to contact us to let them know about the process for the new application.
Great. And we've got a raised hand from Judy Harden, who's on the line. Judy, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to know, is there a reason why the city council and the mayor them cannot put in a new ordinance to combat the splitting of the properties instead of us having to go through this application process thing? I mean, can't they just put in a new ordinance so those lots won't be split? Whereas you can build 2 homes on one that's supposed to be one single family lot, and they're splitting it to put 2 homes on there?
So the ordinance is currently written so that a community will come to the city of Houston to request this ordinance. This is an ordinance that the city is not putting on any particular neighborhood. There are some communities and some blocks where individuals choose not to apply this type of restriction on their lots. And so the city recognizes that every community is different. There are some communities that choose to have subdivided lots, that choose to have subdivisions, and the city is there to support those neighborhoods as well. So that's why it's very important that this is a community-driven process, because it is up to the community to come to the city to say that they want this in their neighborhood.
Okay, well, it just seems like it's going more towards the ones who do not want those lots split. It just seemed like the process is such a long, tedious process that they have to go through in order to just get that done. It seemed like there should be some sort of ordinance in place to help them, whereas they do not have to go through this long, tedious application process. And I mean, that's what the ordinance are for. They're for to put these laws into place. So it just seems like there should be something more that the city council and the mayor can do in order for us not to have to go through this long process, whereas we have to go back to the planning department to vote on something. It just seems like it's too tedious.
Yeah, I understand your point. It is the duty of the city to represent and honor wishes of individuals and property owners. So this gives an opportunity for those that want the protection to initiate it, and for those that choose to leave their lots unrestricted to have that option too. Honestly, this is kind of this is a win-win situation because it honors those residents that want it, and it honors those residents that choose to be able to possibly subdivide their property in the future. Are there other questions in the queue, Cam?
Yeah, we've gotten a couple of comments and questions about touching back on something we brought up just a minute ago, the deed restrictions about using maybe the city attorney's office has in the past helped community neighborhoods that are pursuing deed restrictions. I'm not familiar with that service, but that's been brought up by a couple of different folks in the chat. And then let's see, I'm trying to see if there's anything else that we haven't addressed.
Oh, I spotted one in the chat actually from CGJ. Is there a map of protected neighborhoods that can be viewed? We do have an online mapping tool where you can look at existing special minimum lot size and special minimum building line protections. That tool is called the Houston Map Viewer. Cam, could you provide a link to that in the chat?
Absolutely. Give me one moment.
Yes, this is a map where you can check, like you can check what you would like to have visible on the map, whether it's you can customize the map in a way of how you in the information that you want to see, such as the special minimum lot size applications, super neighborhood boundaries, complete communities, and so on. But that will be a good mapping tool to look up those existing protections.
And there is a short version that just shows the minimum lot size and building line that's on the page in the planning department. You can look at that, or you can use the Houston Map Viewer. You have options to be able to look up. Now, I will add, these are only for minimum lot size and minimum building line protections. These maps do not include deed restrictions in general. There is a way to do some research on your own with the Harris County database in order to look up deed restrictions. I'll see if we can post that in the chat as well.
And I would also like to add that within those maps, you can identify which ordinance have the land use restriction and which ones do not have it. Again, the application, minimum lot size block applications approved prior October, from October 2007, do not have land use restriction. So you will be able to identify those ordinances within the map. We also have the ordinance number. So the ordinance start with the year that, ordinance number start with the year that it was approved. So that's also a good indication to know if is how old the ordinance is.
The only other question that came in is if there was an online form that to support the I guess the petition gathering, but that is not the current practice at this time. So just wanted to touch base on that. I don't think there's anything else. Yeah, Lynn just popped the link to the property deed restrictions and property records from the Harris County clerk into the chat. So feel free to take a look there. I think that is all the questions.
Well, if that's the case, I would like to also inform you guys that in March 2nd, we will have another meeting to talk about minimum lot size and minimum building lines application in Spanish. So I believe Devante put the information in the chat with the flyer. So I would ask you to please inform the community or your neighbors or anybody speak Spanish who also would like to be informed about the application process and how these tools help to protect the character neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood. Uh, I would appreciate it if you could share that with your neighbors and the community who will benefit out of this meeting. Again, it will be on March 2nd at 6:30. And thank you, Devante, for sharing the flyer, put it on the chat, and all the information is there. And we have another slide with our contact information from the planning department. So if you have any other questions about this meeting or the one on March 2nd, by all means, let us know.
And yes, also there are other tools that, although tonight was focusing on minimum lot size and minimal building lines, there are other neighborhood character preservation tools that are offered from the city. Specifically, if a person's interested in applying for historic district designations or landmark or protected landmark designations, we have our Houston Office of Preservation. And their contact information is on here. And of course, I could provide you our general planning number that can also direct you to the proper division. And then there's also the prohibited yard parking program that was mentioned a little bit earlier by Lynn. This purpose of this program is in case if there are any concerns that a person has in regards to vehicles that are parking on any unimproved surfaces on the front lawn or side lawn. And this could be a parking program to help enforce these types of visual visual barriers or things that can, cause much more of a visual and also infrastructure and underground concerns. And then last but not least, there's also residential permit parking designations in which you can contact the Administration and Regulatory Affairs Department. These permits are useful for residential areas that are nearby like high traffic areas or that may spill over into the residential areas or like areas that has a mixture of land uses that could spill over in terms of traffic into the residential areas. So these permits offered through the Administration of Regulatory Affairs could be an avenue that one can take. And then if you go to the next slide, in general, you can contact our planning department if you're interested in any of these tools. Our number is 832-393-6600. Again, I will repeat it for anyone who has called in. Our number is 832-393-6600. Or you can visit us online at houstonplanning.com, where you will have access to download copies of the applications that you may be interested in applying for your block or area. But before we conclude, I think I see a hand raised. Who was that by, Cameron?
That is Broderick. Broderick, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to know, could we make a request to either be sent or to be directed where he didn't say a flyer, but he said there would be something to talk about the meeting in Spanish. I would love to get that. So in some digital format, whether you point me to it or send it to me so that I can share it with individuals in the community. So he mentioned that he had some type of flyer or something available. And I just want to know, how can we get that directly?
Abraham.
Yeah, it is in the chat. Devante, I'm sorry for asking you again. Could you put it in the chat one more time?
Yes, but also his question is, how can he obtain a copy that he can download? Where can they access it? Where else can he obtain the flyer after this meeting?
Like in a PDF form.
Yeah,
PDF.
let me provide my email address in the chat. So if you all want to have this, the digital version of it, I will be happy to send it to you. Please just let me know.
And there was one other question about where the recording of this meeting will be posted for those who may have joined late. How are we disseminating that information after this meeting?
There will be a follow-up email with a link to where it's posted. It will also be posted on all of the Let's Talk Houston pages for the complete communities. And in that follow-up email, we will also include the Spanish flyer, so you can pass that on to your neighbors as well.
And
Thank you,
giving a
Lindsay.
plug to the planning department's YouTube channel. Many of our workshops and our complete community meetings are posted on our YouTube channel for Houston planning.
Great. I think, Broderick, you raised your hand again.
I'm sorry, not trying to drag this out. There was a question that was in the chat that talked about if a community didn't have updated deed restrictions, they could take the step of creating an HOA to keep those deed restrictions current. I'm curious, outside of the method that has been spoken about here and certain communities have used in Texas of getting their deed restrictions updated through a legal process, I was wondering, had you guys spoken earlier about a comparison between the two, that was the last process mentioned more viable than getting an attorney, getting 51% of the population, having these public meetings, but just go create an HOA? So had you guys discussed that already or not?
If I understand your question correctly, an HOA in itself would need to have deed restrictions that would be filed with the county clerk's office in order for them to have restrictions that the HOA could then work by. The HOA itself would need that legal document, and that legal document is the deed restrictions. There are certain processes with deed restrictions, as well as with our lot size and building size ordinances, which provide the opportunity for people to opt out or protest, depending on the process, to be able to speak in favor of or in favor against. And so the laws are made in such a way that allows people to be able to do that. So yes, you can create a homeowners association, but you would need the deed restrictions themselves in order to apply restrictions on your property.
Okay, so I hear what you're saying. I'm gonna try to convey my thoughts clearly. You said we could do it, but you said you need to have the deed restrictions. Could you clarify for me in a scenario such as this? I sit in a community today that had deed restrictions that were put in the 1960s. Those deed restrictions have perhaps lapsed. So therefore, we're no longer under any deed restrictions in 2022. So I sit in this meeting, I see someone who puts in a kernel of an idea that says, why don't you just create a homeowners association? So I then say, hey, maybe I should in 2022, with our deed restrictions lapped in the neighborhood I live in, go rally the community to create a homeowners association. And my question was, could I do that reasonably with some process? Or is it a waste of time because it will not achieve the goal I'm seeking. And when I say deed restrictions, I'm talking establishing new deed restrictions, not the lapsed deed restrictions. So I'm kind of lost when you say deed restrictions.
So deed restrictions are restricted covenants. It's basically an agreement. It's like signing a contract with someone, and those are private restrictions or covenants placed with you and your neighbor and however many lots or houses that would be included in that boundary. I would recommend that you seek an attorney, or even there would be some limited advice that the city's legal department would be able to just give you general information about how to go about the process. There are some nonprofits out there that help nonprofits establish deed restrictions. That is an opportunity. I cannot give you advice. I'm not an attorney. However, I would say if you want restrictions on your lot, you would need to go through the process that's established by the state of Texas in order to actually get deed restrictions. The work that you would do in order to like put together the homeowners association, that type of work is necessary. Reaching out to your neighbors, discussing the type of restrictions you would want included in your covenants. Those are all helpful items in the process. But I really urge any group to seek out professional services to help them actually draft the restrictions and walk you through the process.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to belabor the point. I just wanted to know if he had found a very succinct way to update and bypass and get people to where they were. So it was just a take on, would it work, or is it, hey, not really worth you guys' time? It's no more shorter than going and updating the deed restrictions, getting the community to vote, and then legally putting them into place. An HOA would just be something you establish, and you might come to regret it at some point because you got fees to pay and a structure in place. And before you know it, politics gets involved, and now you're sitting there saying we never should have done that to achieve just a simple goal, because now we've got to figure out how to get rid of the HOA. So I appreciate it. I apologize for dragging this on. Thank you so much.
Great questions. And I do want to acknowledge that Broderick posted in the chat the link to lonestarlegal.org. This is one of the nonprofits that can help organizations with this type of request.
I think we do have one more raised hand in the chat. Sorry, I'm having trouble seeing who that is.
That's okay. I just have a quick question. A minute ago, he mentioned that the deed restrictions were, I guess, from 1960. Are you sure that they're lapsed, or is that just an assumption because it was that late? Because I've seen restrictions. I've seen the deed restrictions that are that old, and they're still good. So it's worked in this process. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
That's a great point, Yvonne. Again, I would urge you to seek legal advice. In fact, my father, who was a civic club president for 30 years or more, at the time thought he and the community thought they had viable deed restrictions, but in the language was an expiration date. So I urge you again to seek legal advice just to make sure. Seek a professional that can help you through the process. And I see Yvonne's hand again.
No, I'm sorry. I'm lowering it again. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, if there are no other questions, I think we are at the end of our meeting. I appreciate all of those who are on the call this afternoon, I will be looking for applications to come to our office. I think there were some great questions and seemed to be people interested in filing applications for either minimum building line or minimum lot size or both. Our phone number is on the screen, 832-393-6600, if you have questions or need help with the application process. Any last words from any of the staff? All right, well, thank you, everyone, and we'll be looking for your applications. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Have a good evening.
Take care.
Thanks. Have a great evening.